account, and promised to take great care of the kingdom, and only to amuse herself by looking at the peacock and making Frisk dance while they were away. So they set out, and asked everyone they met, "Do you know the king of the peacocks?" But the answer was always no, no. Then they went on and on, so far that no one had ever been farther, and at last they came to the kingdom of the cockchafers. They had never before seen such a number of cockchafers, and the buzzing was so loud that the king was afraid he should be deafened by it. He asked the most distinguished-looking cockchafer they met if he knew where they could find the king of the peacocks. "Sire," replied the cockchafer, "his kingdom is 30,000 leagues from this. You have come the longest way." "And how do you know that?" said the king. "Oh," said the cockchafer, "we all know you very well, since we spend 2 or 3 months in your garden every year." Thereupon the king and the prince made great friends with him, and they all walked arm in arm and dined together, and afterwards the cockchafer showed them all the curiosities of his strange country, where the tiniest green leaf cost a gold piece and more. Then they set out again to finish their journey, and this time, as they knew the way, they were not long upon the road. It was easy to guess that they had come to the right place, for they saw peacocks in every tree, and their cries could be heard a long way off. When they reached the city, they found it full of men and women who were dressed entirely in peacocks' feathers, which were evidently thought prettier than anything else. They soon met the king, who was driving about in a beautiful little golden carriage, which glittered with diamonds, and was drawn at full speed by 12 peacocks. The king and the prince were delighted to see that the king of the peacocks was as handsome as possible. He had curly golden hair and was very pale, and he wore a crown of peacock's feathers. When he saw Rosette's brothers, he knew at once that they were strangers, and stopping his carriage, he sent for them to speak to him. When they had greeted him, they said, "Sire, we have come from very far away to show you a beautiful portrait." So saying, they drew from their traveling bag the picture of Rosette. The king looked at it in silence a long time, but at last he said, "I could not have believed that there was such a beautiful princess in the world." "Indeed, she is really 100 times as pretty as that," said her brothers. "I think you must be making fun of me," replied the king of the peacocks. "Sire," said the prince, "my brother is a king like yourself. He is called the king. I am called the prince, and that is the portrait of our sister, the Princess Rosette. We have come to ask if you would like to marry her. She is as good as she is beautiful, and we will give her a bushel of gold pieces for her dowry." "Oh, with all my heart," replied the king, "and I will make her very happy. She shall have whatever she likes, and I shall love her dearly. Only I warn you that if she is not as pretty as you have told me, I will have your heads cut off." "Oh, certainly, we quite agree to that," said the brothers in one breath. "Very well. Off with you into prison, and stay there until the princess arrives," said the king of the peacocks. And the princes were so sure that Rosette was far prettier than her portrait, that they went without a murmur. They were very kindly treated, and that they might not feel dull, the king came often to see them. As for Rosette's portrait, that was taken up to the palace, and the king did nothing but gaze at it all day and all night. As the king and the prince had to stay in prison, they sent a letter to the princess, telling her to pack up all her treasures as quickly as possible, and come to them, as the king of the peacocks was waiting to marry her. But they did not say that they were in prison, for fear of making her uneasy. When Rosette received the letter, she was so delighted that she ran about telling everyone that the king of the peacocks was found, and she was going to marry him. Guns were fired, and fireworks let off. Everyone had as many cakes and sweetmeats as he wanted. and for 3 days everybody who came to see the princess was presented with a slice of bread and jam, a nightingale's egg, and some hippocras. After having thus entertained her friends, she distributed her dolls among them, and left her brother's kingdom to the care of the wisest old men of the city, telling them to take charge of everything, not to spend any money, but save it all up until the king should return, and above all, not to forget to feed her peacock. Then she set out, only taking with her her nurse, and their nurse's daughter, and the little green dog, Frisk. They took a boat and put out to sea, carrying with them the bushel of gold pieces, and enough dresses to last the princess 10 years if she wore 2 every day, and they did nothing but laugh and sing. The nurse asked the boatman, "Can you take us? Can you take us to the kingdom of the peacocks?" But he answered, "Oh, no, oh, no." Then she said, "You must take us, you must take us." And he answered, "Very soon, very soon." Then the nurse said, "Will you take us? Will you take us?" And the boatman answered, "Yes, yes." Then she whispered in his ear, "Do you want to make your fortune?" And he said, "Certainly I do." "I can tell you how to get a bag of gold," said she. "I ask nothing better," said the boatman. "Well," said the nurse, "tonight, when the princess is asleep, you must help me to throw her into the sea, and when she is drowned, I will put her beautiful clothes upon my daughter, and we will take her to the king of the peacocks, who will be only too glad to marry her, and as your reward, you shall have your boat full of diamonds." The boatman was very much surprised at this proposal, and said, "But what a pity to drown such a pretty princess!" However, at last the nurse persuaded him to help her, and when the night came and the princess was fast asleep as usual, with Frisk curled up on his own cushion at the foot of her bed, the wicked nurse fetched the boatman and her daughter, and between them they picked up the princess, feather bed, mattress, pillows, blankets, and all, and threw her into the sea without even waking her. Now, luckily, the princess's bed was entirely stuffed with phoenix feathers, which are very rare, and have the property of always floating upon water. So Rosette went on swimming about as if she had been in a boat. After a little while she began to feel very cold, and turned round so often that she woke Frisk, who started up, and having a very good nose, smelt the soles and herrings so close to him that he began to bark. He barked so long and so loud that he woke all the other fish, who came swimming up round the princess's bed, and poking at it with their great heads. As for her, she said to herself, "How our boat does rock upon the water! I am really glad that I am not often as uncomfortable as I have been tonight." The wicked nurse and the boatman, who were by this time quite a long way off, heard Frisk barking, and said to each other, "That horrid little animal and his mistress are drinking our health in sea water now. Let us make haste to land, for we must be quite near the city of the king of the peacocks." The king had sent 100 carriages to meet them, drawn by every kind of strange animal. There were lions, bears, wolves, stags, horses, buffaloes, eagles, and peacocks. The carriage intended for the Princess Rosette had 6 blue monkeys, which could turn somersaults, and dance on a tightrope, and do many other charming tricks. Their harness was all of crimson velvet with gold buckles, and behind the carriage walked 60 beautiful ladies chosen by the king to wait upon Rosette and amuse her. The nurse had taken all the pains imaginable to deck out her daughter. She put on her Rosette's prettiest frock, and covered her with diamonds from head to foot. But she was so ugly that nothing could make her look nice, and what was worse, she was sulky and ill-tempered, and did nothing but grumble all the time. When she stepped from the boat and the escort sent by the king of the peacocks caught sight of her, they were so surprised that they could not say a single word. "Now then, look alive!" cried the false princess.